might have heard of Preacher from the AMC series made by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, or you might have read the original comic run made by Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon. Me, on the other hand, I was introduced to this series completely by accident. I actually got a couple of these issues from a mystery box. I went into it having no idea if I was even going to like it or not, and it really didn't even seem like something I'd be into because it wasn't a superhero comic. But I actually ended up really enjoying it. It's an action-packed story filled with gritty, dark humor that has a very complex storyline.
I almost forgot to mention that this comic line came out from DC and is actually under their line of comics called Vertigo, which is meant for a more adult audience. That's why it's more of a gory, adult, humor-oriented comic.
As I was reading it, I realized I recognized a character. That character being Assface, aka Eugene. I remember seeing clips of him on TikTok before of the live action adaptation, and it just made me so excited that there was a whole TV show that I could watch after finishing the comic. And that's exactly what I did, because after finishing the comic for the first time, I binge watched the entire 4 seasons of the TV show. And honestly, I wasn't let down. That's why in today's video, I wanted to go over both of the adaptations and compare the differences between the two. Is this sacrilegious? Is this an affront to God? So let's get introduced to the main characters of the series. The trio contains our main protagonist, Jesse Custer, his star-crossed lover, Tulip O'Hare, and his best friend / undead vampire, Cassidy. So in the show, compared to the comics, the way they meet is completely different. In fact, the first season is wildly different compared to the comics, and it kind of serves as a prequel to the story. We get to see Jesse as a preacher, and he's not really good at what he does. So basically, we just get to see chronologically how they all met and how their pasts are affecting one another. You learn how Jesse had to do some bad things to make money, and he ran out on Tulip. He goes on to learn that Cassidy's an undead vampire who's allergic to the sun, and you see how Jesse gets hit by an entity that is now inside him and gives him divine powers called Genesis.
Genesis is the offspring of an angel and a demon.
This power allows Jesse to make anyone do what he says just by telling them.
Be brave. Tell her the truth. Open your heart.
Be brave. Tell her the truth. Open my heart. To you.
And if you haven't already, you should press the subscribe button. In the show, we are introduced to many different original characters that we didn't get to see in the comics. Some examples being Emily, who serves as like a second love interest for Jesse, and the guy that Jesse accidentally kills using Genesis for the first time. When comparing this to the comics, Genesis flies into the church, absorbs himself into Jesse, and explodes, killing everyone inside except for himself. And that's when he's found by Tulip and Cassidy. Another big difference in the show is how they handle the characters Hugo Root, who is the sheriff, and his son Eugene. So in the show, the sheriff is asking for help from Jesse because of his son who has recently attempted to take his own life. But in the comic, the sheriff is a huge piece of shit racist who's investigating the explosion at the church. He actually only lasts around like 100 to 120 pages. Eugene's story is slightly changed because they add a layer to it that's pretty interesting. In the comic, it's pretty plain and simple. Eugene's home life is really bad, and he ended up just imitating what Kurt Cobain did. But obviously the attempt fails, leaving him looking the way that he does. But in the show, he was actually hanging out with a girl who was trying to take her own life. While trying to stop her, she still shoots herself, but doesn't die. Then out of guilt and fear, Eugene tries to do so as well, but also fails. Damn! Both iterations of the character are very lovable, and I really like the actor who plays Eugene in the show.
If you want to be there, you should be.
I want to be there. It's just, I don't think that God must be here. He's mad at me.
The next big departure would be how the Angels handle getting Genesis back. In the show, the Angels DeBlanc and Fior come down to Earth themselves to try and get Genesis back. Well, in the comic, they actually wake up the Saint of Killers, who will become very important in the story later, to start the hunt for Jesse Custer and Genesis. On top of having to worry about the Angels this season, Jesse has to deal with the villain, Mr. Quincannon, who's actually a villain who doesn't get introduced in the comic till the 3rd book. This plotline is a huge departure from the comic, and not only that, they toned down this villain a lot. Like, he's still a weirdo in the TV show, but in the comic, he's easily the creepiest person that Jesse comes across. Like I've said, there's already been a lot of changes so far, but this one's probably the biggest one. This being the plotline where Eugene gets sent to hell by Preacher. Once he gets sent to hell, you don't really see him for the rest of the season. But in the comics, Sheriff Root is the one who was actually the victim to Jesse's power, as Jesse tells Sheriff Root to go fuck himself, which he then promptly does. The doctors tell the sheriff that his Peter is stuck in his colon, and that they will not be able to reattach it. And then the sheriff proceeds to Either way, both plot lines send Eugene into his revenge arc. I thought this was a weird change to the story, but I don't think it necessarily ruined anything. I just found it annoying how they sent away Eugene, and then he just doesn't even come back until the second season, and it's a few episodes into that season, if I'm not mistaken, where he finally gets reintroduced. I got more gripes with that plotline later, so stay tuned for that. Throughout the season, Jesse finally finds a way to contact God along with everyone in his church. But while doing so, he finds out that God actually quit, and he's no longer in heaven. He's actually returned to Earth. Jesse then decides he's going to track down God and find out what his plan is. This right here is exactly why the first season felt like an entire setup for the rest of the show. Because in the comic, this is his motivation right away. You as the reader, after reading the first issue of the comic, know that that is his goal. Season 1 might end there, but the first book has a lot of plot lines that didn't end up getting used. I can see why some of them didn't get used because it is a bit repetitive thematically, but it was still very interesting. The reason that I say repetitive is because it sets up this narrative for Cassidy where you kind of see how after living for 100 years, he's kind of had a lot of toxic and bad relationships. You get the sense that Cassidy's not really a good judge of character, but at the same time, he's willing to correct bad behavior. In Season 2, they start their search for God in New Orleans. This is because they got a tip saying that God likes jazz.
You like jazz?
In the comic, they start their search in Texas, and then they go to New York, and then at some point, I believe they go to New Orleans. They start going to jazz bars, but it seems like the first one they go to has a lead for them. Until they get to the basement of this club and realize it's just some weird kink. So they leave, continuing their search of every bar in New Orleans, turning up empty-handed. We are introduced to an original character not in the comic named Dennis. You come to learn that Dennis is actually the son of Cassidy. This plotline ends up being really sad though, because his son wants to live forever with him as a vampire, and Cassidy ends up doing so. The thing is, once his son did become a vampire, he ended up killing innocent people.
I'm not loyal to anybody. I'm a demon. I have no loyalty for anyone. Never did, never will. Shorty chose to be with a demon. Sounds like her problem to me.
And since he wasn't willing to stop and take control of the bloodlust, Cassidy had to kill his own son. By this point, the Saint of Killers is finally on his way to get Preacher. The Saint of Killers backstory is pretty sad. It has to do with his daughter getting sick, him going out to get medicine, but him being too late and them being dead when he comes back. Jesse does attempt to use his powers, but it doesn't work on the Saint of Killers because he doesn't have a soul.
Oh, please. I have no soul.
But once the Saint of Killers arrives, he takes everyone hostage, telling Preacher that he needs to get him a soul. This way he can enter heaven and get to God.
I really wanted to point out how different the concept of the souls are from the comics because it's a completely new idea that isn't really explored in the comics whatsoever.
Long story short, Jesse finds out that the only soul that's compatible with the Saint of Killers is his own, but he's only willing to give 1% of it away, which he does. Jesse, though, on the other hand, tells the Saint of Killers that God is no longer in heaven.
Jesse is able to outsmart the Saint of Killers by trapping him in the truck, then leaving him at the bottom of the lake.
In this season, we're also introduced to very important characters from an organization known as Grail. We meet Air Star, Hoover, and Dr. Featherstone. The organization wants to rule the world, and they want to do so by putting the Messiah to be the one in power. The Messiah is actually a descendant of Jesus Christ.
Is so happy to see you.
But Star, along with his associates, want to change it from the inside so that Jesse becomes that Messiah. This is because they know of his power. Throughout the season, they're just spying on them until the very end where Tulip confronts them and she gets killed. Jesse also finds out that the first club that they went to actually was the correct club, and that dog costume guy was really God himself. So at the beginning of the series, you keep seeing this flashback where Jesse's young and he watches his father get killed right in front of him, with no context.
So you gotta be one of the good guys. 'Cause why?
Because there's way too many of the bad.
You promised me?
I promise, Daddy.
You finally get that context in the third season. Jesse is desperate because Tulip is dying, and the only person that he knows that could save her is the family that tortured him when he was a young boy. The characters that tormented him include TC, Jody, and Miss Marie. They end up saving her by giving her a soul. This is a really big change because in the comic, the family is actually the people who kill her. And then the person who saves her in the comic is God. Miss Marie now owns Jesse again, and not only that, but Jesse's powers do not work because he doesn't have 100% of a soul anymore. Meanwhile, Cassidy went off and found a vampire boyfriend who has a vampire death cult. Cassidy does not like the death of innocent people, so he obviously has to stop him. On top of that, during this plotline, they added a bunch of different new lore that was never in the comic. Specifically, the way that vampires have more powers in the TV show. Like, this vampire is somehow able to fly, is able to, like, seduce people with just, like, a weird hypnotizing gaze. It's weird. I don't understand why they added that, but it's pretty interesting because it did happen in the comic in a similar fashion, just like I said, without the added powers.
So back during season 2, you see some of Eugene's time spent in hell, where he's stuck there with Hitler, and he's actually stuck there with this character named Tyler, who seems to be like a loose reference to the character Bryce from 13 Reasons Why.
Which makes sense because he literally is the devil himself. He is a piece of shit in that TV show. But must I say, huge departure from the comics.
Because I'm murder fucking Hitler!
At some point, Jesse ends up getting captured, and Star ends up trying to give him a deal where he can help get his soul restored so he can use Genesis once again. The Allfather has different plans for him. Jesse learns that they've been cloning the Messiah so that they can hopefully give Genesis to the real Messiah. The reason why they had to make clones is because every time Genesis gets into a new host, the people who are not able to contain it explode. Jesse ends up finding a way to escape though. He releases all of the Messiah clones and is able to kill the Allfather by releasing Genesis into him. After this, Jesse's able to restore his soul. Jesse immediately goes back to his family's house so he can take him down once and for all. While this is happening, Eugene is able to escape hell with the help of Hitler. The Saint of Killers and the Angel of Death work together to take Eugene back to hell and to also find Tulip and take her to hell as well. Nazis show up and try to stop this from happening, but the Saint of Killers kills all of them. While this is happening, Tulip is almost killed, but God intervenes. He saves her, but tells her that she needs to convince Jesse to forgive him and to stop looking for him, which she completely denies. The Angel of Death pisses off the Saint of Killers, so he rips her eyes out. Then he teams up with Eugene to find Preacher. Once Jesse arrives at the house, he burns it down, and he has a hand-to-hand fist fight with Jody. Satan still wants Eugene, and the Saint of Killers ends up finding out from Satan that God orchestrated his family's death. After finding out this information, the Saint of Killers kills Satan.
Damn!
This now completely releases Eugene from hell. Cassidy, after saving the vampire cult, is immediately captured by Grail via house airlift. The fourth season starts with a time jump where Grail is torturing Cassidy, and Tulip and Jesse are going to save him.
In this season, we get a flashback scene to Cassidy's past, and it shows how Cassidy became a vampire almost exactly like the comics did.
Tulip fights Featherstone while Jesse infiltrates to try and save Cassidy. And must I say, this is probably this is probably the worst fight scene in the entire show. Like, the rest of the show has amazing fight scenes and fight choreography. For some reason, they dropped the ball here. But instead of leaving, Cassidy and Jesse just fight the entire way, and Cassidy ends up deciding to stay.
So a lot of the things that happen in the show did happen in the comic, but just in a different order. Like when Cassidy gets kidnapped by Grail, that happens way earlier in the comic, but he doesn't decide to stay there after he gets saved.
After the failed attempt, Tulip goes back to Masada to try again, but Cassidy is able to find a way to get out himself. The Saint of Killers in the show literally shoots a hole through Earth all the way to Australia. This way, Eugene and him can fast travel the Preacher. When they do find him, Eugene shoots Jesse, but it doesn't kill him. Eugene is then taken away and put into prison.
Eugene's plotline in the comic is a lot more chill as he confronts Jesse, but they end up all just apologizing to one another and becoming friends.
God is angry at Star for losing his great-grandson, so he makes a dingo eat his cock and ball. This also happens in the comic, but for different reasons. Saint of Killers still has Jesse, but Cassidy and Tulip, who have now reunited, got a plane so they can go and save Preacher. While doing so, God sets off a powerful explosion, shaking the plane, and that causes Preacher to fly out. Cassidy, in a quick attempt, grabs Preacher by the hand, but since it's sunny, he starts to catch flame. Preacher, not wanting his best friend to pass away, decides that he's going to use his power to make Cassidy let go.
No, just Jesse, don't. Let me go.
This causes Jesse to fall to his death.
And on top of that, the circumstances for them getting into the plane and the explosion that gets set off is also different.
Jesse is then shown heaven and sees the angel from season 1. The angel wants Jesse to sit in God's throne and take his place, but Jesse adamantly denies. That is until he's forced to sit down in God's throne, which actually resurrects him. Tulip and Cassidy escape the explosion while Star is knocked unconscious and taken somewhere. Star wakes up to see that his leg is missing and that these cannibals who saved him are currently eating him. Even though this is mortifying, Star finds a way to kill them all and escape. Star gets really depressed and he tries to hang himself, but instead rips his nipples off. At his lowest, God tells him that if he's able to bring back the Messiah, that he will restore his good looks. He does, and then God fulfills his wish.
Oh no, he's hot!
God then confronts Jesse face to face. Jesse pisses him off, causing God to bite his eye out. This scene happens in the comic almost exactly the way it happens in the show, except this in the comic actually happens right after Jesse dies. So here's an important plot line that I somehow forgot to explain in the script. Essentially, a huge part of the plot in both stories is the love triangle between the main trio. In the TV show, the love triangle starts almost immediately. Cassidy falls in love pretty quick and announces his feelings for her pretty quick. But in the comic, it takes a while before it gets to a spot where the love triangles actually affects the story. But by this point in the show, when Jesse goes back and reunites with them, Tulip comes clean and tells Jesse that they have slept together.
For some reason, this news doesn't really surprise or really seem to bother Jesse. In the comic, after being resurrected, Jesse goes to reunite with the gang again. But when he sees them, they have already moved on and started dating one another. This leaves Jesse mortified. He decides not to reunite with them and to move on to make a different life. Cassidy and God make a deal behind the backs of Jesse and Tulip. In the show, they make a deal for Cassidy to help God find the Messiah so that God will spare Cassidy and leave his friends alone. In the comic, Cassidy makes a deal with God that if he can stop Jesse for long enough for God to take Genesis out of Jesse, that he will spare not only Cassidy, but will make sure that Jesse is saved no matter what. After surviving the car hitting him, Eugene starts his music arc, which in the comics he starts way earlier. And that's kind of the end of Eugene's plotline. It's kind of sad considering he never really gets a true reconciliation with Jesse. At least I never felt like they really reconnected by the end of the show. Jesse and God end up having a confrontation at a church. When the Saint of Killers arrives, a fight breaks out between two angels and the Saint of Killers, allowing for God to escape. At the end of the fight, Jesse tells the Saint of Killers that he can find God for him so he can get his final kill. He uses Genesis to command the Grail members to go on a worldwide search for God, which takes 2 years. In this time jump, Jesse and Tulip have a kid, which is something that does not happen in the comics. When Jesse gets the chance to talk to God again, he releases Genesis, telling God that he doesn't need it, and proceeds to punch God in the face. God ends up going back to heaven just to see that all of the angels that were there are now dead, and the Saint of Killers is waiting for him. God begs for his life, and the Saint of Killers shoots him right in the head. Damn! We're then greeted with a 40-year time jump, where Jesse and Tulip are now dead, and their child is now visiting their grave with their grandchildren. Cassidy arrives and greets her completely unchanged. He reminisces with her about them, and then proceeds to walk into the sun, willingly taking his own life so he can join his friends. In the comic though, the fate of our trio is very different, and it's a lot more sad. You see, in the comic, after Jesse decides to not reunite with the gang, Cassidy and Tulip end up engaging in a very toxic relationship. Tulip ends up leaving it, but is only able to by shooting him outside. Cassidy still continues to think he hasn't done much wrong, and when Jesse reunites with Tulip and finds out all this information, this is when it leads to their final confrontation. It starts with them having a conversation in the bar, and then they end up having their final fight. They start beating the hell out of each other, and while doing so, Tulip takes out the remaining Grail forces, including Star himself. This is actually a big difference from the TV show, considering in the show he survives. As they're fighting, Cassidy stops, and he realizes that he doesn't deserve to live, that Jesse is actually right, and continuing to fight is kind of pointless. He ends up willingly walking into the sun and dying. Jesse and Tulip have a bit of a rough patch after this, but he's able to reconcile their relationship and they end up together at the end. Not only that, but you learn that Cassidy actually added another part of the deal with God, which was that on top of Jesse being okay no matter what, Cassidy would actually get a second chance at being mortal again. So in the final comic panel, you finally get to see Cassidy as the sun rises and it touches his skin and he doesn't burn. To give some final thoughts, I wanted to say that this adaptation does a really good job of adapting this comic book faithfully, but also finding a way to be completely different. The show does such a good job of keeping the same type of dark humor that's in the original comic. Even the way that it was modernized for the show worked very well. But I think the thing that I enjoy most of all, having two different adaptations of this story, is seeing the two different endings. Personally, for stories, I have two endings that I really like, and that's a happy ending and a bittersweet ending. So now that there are two adaptations that have two completely different endings, it gave me exactly that. The TV show has a very nice, happy ending, I would say, comparatively to the comics. And the comics have a very bittersweet ending, where the trio isn't really together by the end. There's still so much from the Preacher comic that I haven't even talked about, like how the TV show cut out an entire plot line that included Jesse's mother. It also cut out backstory that regarded Jesse's father, and I didn't even mention one of the villains that actually shows up in the show and in the comic. So leave a like if you want to see a video about the stuff that got left out. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.
Fuck you. Brother is 2 inches away from his 20-inch monitor. Fuck off.
You
know what I'm talking about.
Matthew?
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
You talking about Matthew, Blake?
Yeah.
I have no monitor. I'm not in front of. I'm on a big ass TV right now.
I'm not a tryhard. I swear. I'm just sweating profusely.
Big dog is definitely sweating right now.